Good afternoon. This is a meeting of the Harwich Affordable Housing Trust. It was intended to be a joint meeting with the Harwich Housing Committee. It's Wednesday, January 19th, 2022. I'm Joe Powers, Chairman of the Affordable Housing Trust. However, unfortunately, we only have 2 members of the Housing Committee present, so it is not a meeting for them. So the way that we will proceed is I will call the Affordable Housing Trust meeting to order, and everybody will identify themselves on the trust, and then we can acknowledge our colleagues in government who are here, and this will be treated as an Affordable Housing Trust meeting with guests and participants present. With that, we do have member of the Housing Trust, Larry Brophy, participating remotely by telephone on GoToMeeting. So Larry, if you can hear me, if you hit *6, you should be able to unmute, and if you do so, just identify yourself for the record, please.
Caleb, can you unmute him?
It gives me the option to allow him to unmute himself.
And
I'll send him a text.
Caleb, while you're doing that, can you edit the name?
This computer thing's never going to take
Well, I
off.
can tell you that we're live in a meeting, and I can do color commentary. We're now updating the GoToMeeting marquee.
Press *6, you said, right?
We believe it's *6. If he says that doesn't work, it would be #6. That's our story.
Don't you enjoy seeing yourself up there, Joe?
What was that?
He said, don't you like seeing yourself up there?
Oh, always and never. While we're waiting for Larry Brophy, I'll then start with the member to my right for the Affordable Housing Trust.
Brendan Lowney?
Don Howell.
Judith Underwood?
And again, Joe Powers. So we are the 4 of the 5 members from the Housing Trust. We're joined this evening by 2 members of the Housing Committee as well as a member of the board. So to my left from the Housing Committee.
Joe McFarland.
Thank you, Joe. To my right from the Housing Committee.
Mary Maslowski.
And dead center is Selectman Liaison.
Mary Anderson.
So, Larry, we're going to begin. We hope at some point you'll be able to join us on the phone. But what we contemplated was a joint meeting between the Harwich Affordable Housing Trust and the Harwich Housing Committee. And so the first requirement, or the first item, I should say, that these 2 boards are required to do is a discussion on the development of an affordable housing plan, and that is in accordance with with the town's general bylaws, Chapter 140, which is the Affordable Housing Trust Bylaw, and under that, under Section 2, subsection B, requires that the Affordable Housing Trust and the Housing Committee confer at least once a year on the housing production plan, and then after that, transmit that to the Board of Selectmen. And so that's the first agenda item that we have today to discuss. And so I would open it up to any members of the trust, the Housing Committee, or Selectman Anderson, if there's any thoughts that they want to begin with on our housing production plan. The floor is now open to anyone. Mary Maslowski.
So I will just comment that, when we adopted the current housing production plan in 2016, if I recall the numbers correctly, the goal was to add 22 units a year. I think at this point we are far below that number, and we are now in a position that we need to catch up even further than we did then. So, speaking for myself, and I think Joe will agree, whatever we can do to assist the trust in the projects that are going forward, I think we're open to doing whatever we can. We've been aboard without a mission in the last few years, and frankly, since I've been on it, because when I started, we were in the process of the trust getting formed, and there really wasn't much for us to do or to contribute, and we're certainly ready and willing and able to contribute where we can, wherever the trust and wherever the Board of Selectmen see fit.
Sure. Selectman Howell?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's actually, in a way, there's 2 different things going on here. There's the production plan and the process, which you're talking about. can we back up for a second? The production plan needs to be updated. I mean, because it's pretty much reached its useful life under the state filing, so I mean, we've got to, work on revising that, first of all. Mary's right about all that other stuff. Partly that it was pandemic-driven, because we had always anticipated, and we started doing that. That's where I mentioned earlier to you folks when you're coming in the room, that Art had participated in the action plan workshops, which we'd anticipated doing cross-postings on, but then we blew that up when you couldn't actually hold any in-person workshops anymore. I'm not sure where we're at with Jen Goldson, but at some point or another, we've got to get our own act together, because the action plan process would have given us a bully pulpit to be able to have everybody comment about where we are, what we need to do, and how we need to do it.
So we did have one meeting with
Jen?
Jen.
Yeah.
And yourself, but it wasn't certainly wasn't the joint meeting that I think is required under the bylaw. But we had started that, and then it never went further than that.
And we didn't anticipate that that would count against this.
No, I'm not saying that you did, I'm just saying that I know we had started that at one point, and then it all kind of fell by the wayside, so.
Where we are with that right now is that contract aged out on June 30th. It has to be reissued, because only about 40% of the work of the action plan process had been performed by the time it was suspended. So, but you're right, and I would anticipate the Housing Committee should really be a vigorous part of that, because one of the things that I had talked about with Art was the Housing Committee. I think I said this to you too, Joe. The Housing Committee could be doing public outreach workshops to try to get some public enthusiasm about going over affordable housing and explaining why it's critical. Art never got to that point.
So I guess I have a question as to whether the affordable housing plan that we talk about in the bylaw is actually the housing production plan, or whether it is an annual plan, and that's unclear to me, whether the two are separate, or whether it's one and the same.
I understood the bylaw reference. Staff and I worked on, sorry, I can see it now on the agenda. I believe in the bylaw, it's referred to as the housing production plan.
Okay.
I agree. That's how I read it.
That's what I assumed.
So I would say that, in future discussions, we will notice that correctly.
Yep.
Affordable housing plan is meant to be housing production plan.
And that's that big document, right?
That's a 5-year plan,
Yeah,
correct?
the
Yeah,
5-year plan.
so it's aged out, is what I'm saying. What we really, I don't know about the rest of the trust, what I was really anticipating ultimately was that there would be strong participation by the Housing Committee in revising that, but it's got to be staff-driven, because it's something where you really need to riff off of something in front of you. We're not going to write that here, and you're not going to write that in your meetings.
Right.
It's voluminous.
Yeah,
But I would think that we could probably get Eidman in here and have a discussion about, what the current plan says that we would like to say differently, or what goals.
Correct me if I'm wrong, that was drafted by a consultant the last time around.
You are correct.
There was a
Yeah.
consultant involved, because
Yeah.
she had made a number of recommendations, including the reuse of motels, and the changing the ADU bylaw, and things of that sort. So I thought there was a consultant involved, and I don't remember who it was.
I thought it went through Charlene, who got the consultant.
I don't.
The problem is all players are gone.
Because I think Charlene was the ATA at the time. I don't.
Well, there must be a bill somewhere.
I was gonna say,
Right.
yeah, it's probably in the plan. Someone took credit of it for sure, so.
Yeah, but some of that's actually been done. So that's what I'm saying. We need to actually sit down and say, okay, this has been done, this hasn't been
Yeah,
done.
I don't disagree.
Because
with
the rental bylaw, the accessory apartment bylaw got adopted. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
couple of things that have happened.
No, I agree, absolutely. But I'm just saying, I can't remember who the consultant was. It was it was being worked on when I started on planning board, which was 2016, and that was right about when it was getting finalized, and we had had the meetings to support it in that sense.
Well, that's something we need to find out who did it. I'm not even sure
Well,
in this
not-
environment that they're still around.
Well, for me, the question really gets to if we're looking for a consultancy for this housing, for the housing production plan, which to me makes sense. There's folks that do this regularly that can help us. Unfortunately, from my perspective, what we're talking about is a public procurement. And so what I'd have to look at is whether this is something that's done jointly with the Housing Committee. I don't believe you folks have a budget, and Affordable Housing Trust does.
Correct.
But we would want to talk at a future meeting about the consultancy and what we think the value of that is. So from procurement purposes, if we think it's greater than $10,000, and I would think it might be, that requires us to solicit, email solicit 3 firms minimally. We could do as many as we want, but you have to do 3. And all it takes is one of them to reply. So we could talk about, on the agenda later on tonight, about future meetings and steps that we want to take. While we're looking at that, I can work with staff to see if we can find out who was used in prior and how we did that. But it definitely requires a procurement process, to my understanding.
Joe,
Go ahead.
I think John Eidman, when he talked about that big comprehensive town plan. I
So
forget
that would be the local comprehensive
local
plan.
I
Yep,
believe he said that would then drive the housing plan.
Should be the other way around.
But it can happen in both directions. It depends on what happens first.
Okay,
and.
So
for
it can
the-
happen in both directions. Either the affordable housing plan can inform the LIP, or the local comprehensive plan can inform the.
okay, so there's no
Affordable
reason
housing.
we have to wait. Good.
No, but I do think you raise a good point, where the Board of Selectmen on Monday, the 24th of January, will be hearing a presentation from the Director of Planning and Community Development on the local planning committee, so to confuse everybody, the LPC, who will work on the
LCP.
local comprehensive plan, the LCP, and we're talking about the HPP, the Housing Production Plan. However they go, they're both gonna be on a similar track anyway. And so for me, the timing works out very well. To throw out very quickly, the timing works out well on that. And incidentally, the town is also revising the comprehensive wastewater management plan. And so those 3 have a relationship to one another. I think there's a better relationship between the housing production plan and the local comprehensive plan. But the good news, as I've talked to the Board of Selectmen over the last year, is that all of these key documents are coming due at the same time. That can be a good thing, because it's a robust conversation all around. But to go back to it, if we want to talk about the housing production plan and the value that we think it is, that can motivate staff on the procurement.
Might I say to try to move this thing along, because I'd love to see a conclusion here. You've got the person that we had originally procured to do this, if you could look over those records. I'm not entirely certain that J.M. Golson, what they do, because it's not conflict of interest if they're doing ancillary work beyond that in a different area. They may do revisions. There's 351 towns and cities, and not a lot of them are exempt from having to produce a housing production plan. You have to be over 10% to get there. So my next thought is MHP would be a resource to go to and say, okay, this is something that everybody else has to do. So who's out there who does it? I mean, they would be able to give you a running
Right,
list.
and you could also look towards the consultant that did the last one. I mean, to help.
Well, that's what I
advise
said,
you.
is that MHP and Jen
The
Golson
one from
particularly.
2016?
Yes,
So does Karen Sonneborg sound familiar?
that sounds
Brendan, can you
familiar.
say that again, please?
Karen Sonneborg?
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Sunnarborg.
Is there a phone number?
No, I'm just reading it off the plan,
Okay.
off the website from 2016.
Excellent.
I mean, that's kind of really the issue we're talking about, right? We have a plan
Correct,
from
yep.
2016.
Yep.
And what's happened since then, you have the ADUs, there's other programs we can talk about, like the buy down program, rental assistance, but what also came out in the last, 5 years is the trust. So obviously, there has to be an update
Right.
to this plan, because a lot has happened. Whether we produce 22 units or not,
Mhm.
I think we have a clearer pathway to do that.
Agreed.
So I
Carol's
think-
got the other variable here. She knows what she paid him. or her.
I'm sorry, beg your pardon?
Carol has the other element here that you were bringing up, is what threshold
Right,
level you look at?
What was the value at
What was
that
the
point in
value
time?
when that was actually paid off as an invoice?
Right,
Mm.
yep.
Yeah, and this would be an update, which would, was that the first housing production plan done?
Yeah, except that everybody's right. There's different things that have gone on since then. I know from my own perspective, I'd love to be able to see this plan reflect some emphasis on rehabbing existing dwellings. Because you didn't have money, so it probably wasn't relevant back then, but it is relevant now because a certain percentage of the housing trust could be devoted towards rehabbing existing stock at the same time as, we've been talking about this for a couple of years.
You've also had the Stone Horse Motel has been added to, which, while it's not capital A, it's certainly helping,
Mhm.
in those types of potential dormitory situations. So there certainly have been things that have happened that require updating and require going forward, so.
And I'm saying there may be things that we didn't address at all in the plan
Right.
that we'd like to put into it, so
Yeah.
if it's a roadmap, I'd like to be able to come up with some new destinations.
Understood.
Yeah, so there's been some accomplishments. That's what, the point I was trying to make earlier, and I think everything we just said.
Yeah, absolutely.
There has, but it kind of gets lost into what's really happening, and I guess until you put it on paper. But if we can get together and update this plan, I know we're only supposed to meet once a year on this to get the plan.
Oh, that's the minimum.
I know that's the minimum, of course, but it would be nice to get this updated. Seems like a big task, but they can,
Well, the sooner the better. I'm just hoping, and this is no slight on anybody, but maybe we can agree to do some outreach. You guys can do some outreach with your other committee members and get together
I just,
and reorganize the committee because you don't really have a voted chair yet.
right, I mean, we serve at this, by the selectmen, and we're only two right now. I don't know about our other two people, and we're just broken. We're broken in so many ways, and quite honestly, and I apologize for being a little blunt, but until you get a housing coordinator in here, nothing's gonna happen.
But that doesn't affect
Talks
your-
about, well, wait a minute, Don. Everyone talks about a lot of different things. I know you guys are looking for one, and but if you look at the towns around us and the production that they've created in just the last 3 years, blows us out of the water. Because it just organizes it all and puts that one person to work with all three entities. Not so much the housing authority, but definitely you guys who have the money. And the housing committee, with the marketing piece, so, man.
I get that, but as a governmental thing, between the two of you could create some sort of an acknowledgement of who the chair pro tem would be to call a meeting, and then call around and come up with a mutually agreeable date, because you can't do anything unless you meet.
Is two enough bodies, Dawn?
No, there are. It's,
We supposedly have 5 members, so.
You have to have, so, what's the quorum? Do you know?
3,
It's 3,
so
okay.
you're only one away.
yeah.
But I think the charter
So-
says
so
that you gotta
correct me if I'm
rev,
wrong, I understand, your point. Is it as simple, it could be as simple as getting together, even, the idea is you're gonna help us with the housing production plan. And if your group can get together and find a coordinator or consultant to gather and to help you do this,
Yeah.
then you can come to us and present it. We have the dollars to fund that.
Absolutely.
So I think that's kind of what we're looking at. I think
Love
it's just give a task. And we're actually gonna talk about that in our group, where we're gonna start delegating, hopefully, some of these tasks, because we have 7 properties, or 6 or 7 properties, and we want to be able to start doing things on each one to get them all moving. So I think this is just another one of those. I think we just, if you could take on just finding, I know there's only 2 of you, but maybe it's hopefully just an easy phone call, find the right consultant who could,
So I think really
Participate.
the issue with the consultant is that it's a procurement process, right? So that's
Right,
something that has
free.
to be done through administration.
correct, yeah?
Certainly, can we pull names together? Yes, but
Yeah.
it's, and then I think it's assisting with
Well,
reviews and
How long does
comments.
that process take, Joe, to get the 3?
When you're talking about a procurement that's over 10 to 50 or under, it's fairly simple.
Right.
Because you're talking about just required to solicit by email. So as we've talked about, certainly Ms. Sonnenberg, whether she was an individual, sole practitioner or part of a firm, MHP, any of the other firms, there's, I would say, probably at least 6 to 10 firms that we are aware of that do this kind of work. So getting the 3 email addresses or the minimum is simple. And as soon as we get a response, we can act on that. And when I say we can act on that, that level of contract for the town is something that I, as administrator, have authorization from the board to execute. So we could turn it around fairly quickly. It's even easier if the value of the services is under 10,000, because then it's something simply where the assistant town administrator using sound business practices, and that could be talking to the last person who did it, because that's a sound business practice, and that's an invoice. So the acquisition, if you will, of a consultant to me is not of major concern. Assuming that the trust is expecting to use the funds that we have for that purpose.
I was.
Yeah. So we have a funding source, that's always the number one
And where else
thing.
would it come from? I think is there another, that would be the only.
No, it'll have to be an appropriation, and we don't have one, so
Yeah.
it really,
Right.
we've got the money and we don't need an appropriation.
Absolutely, yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess what I was saying though, Joe, don't take it the wrong way, is that
No.
use a month, and I anticipate that we should be able to get the band back together again in another month, and, make some progress towards, okay, where are we, and can we actually execute a contract?
And you guys have done a lot of work. Well, Brett, that's positive numbers, what Brendan told me, it's the 6 to 7 properties, you know what I mean? There's actually, we're ready to push a lot of these things forward.
And we're trying to clear the title for one of them to be able to flip it to
Right.
create cash to be able to do even more.
Exactly. On this topic, Larry, if you can hear us, we want to make sure that you have an opportunity to weigh in.
So Larry just texted me, he can hear everything we're saying. He just wrote, I asked, can you talk? He said, I don't think so. I will try when I have a second. So he's trying to unmute himself.
So we may be able to unmute him. We just want to give him a heads up to
Okay.
be prepared to be on a hot mic.
All right, well, let's do that.
Caleb, can you unmute him?
You can allow him to be unmuted.
Yeah, I can only allow him
Okay, so we can't unmute then.
*6.
When he's on a phone, you can't.
*6. Okay, let's see, tell him again.
The other alternative is you can dial him in and just put him on a microphone.
I can just call him too.
So the feeling of a commercial break.
Well, as we're doing this, there is another topic on the agenda, and I know it's work related to what Selectman Anderson's been working on behalf of the board, and that talks about the membership of the Housing Committee, and it can also talk about the membership of the trust. But what I don't know is that intended more to be a Housing Committee conversation? You folks obviously can still have it, but you can't commit to anything.
Correct.
But that is another topic, and then we can obviously talk about follow-up meeting dates, but
Maybe we could at least talk about it. The suggestion was that it'd be helpful to both groups if somebody from the committee sat on the trust, and if somebody on the trust sat on the committee. That way there'd be broader conversation.
Just sitting in on the meetings.
Pardon?
No, she means on me.
No,
she's saying as a
on the,
member.
somebody from the committee would be a member of the trust, and somebody from the trust would be a member of the committee.
The problem with that, Mary, is that a lot of the folks sitting at this table have more than one role. And I don't know that gets you anywhere further than, Art was enthusiastically welcomed into every meeting. The question wasn't whether he was understanding what we were doing. The question is, he wasn't telling everybody necessarily what was going on when he went back.
No, I mean, I have to say, he told us when he attended your meetings and what was going on.
Yeah.
There was simply nothing for us to do to assist at that point.
So
There was nothing, there was no, we are an advisory board to the Board of Selectmen, not to the Affordable Housing Trust. So there was literally nothing for us to comment on.
Did he
There
tell
were
you
no
that I actually
projects
asked
to
him to
comment
do
on?
housing forums?
Well, the
On a
housing.
number of occasions, I asked him if he could create, through the committee, housing forums to try to create some
So
enthusiasm.
the last time we talked about that, the potential of that was pre-COVID. And then
It was
COVID hit,
pre-COVID, you said?
So-
pre-COVID.
So real quickly, when it comes to Art, he came to, I would think, almost every single meeting. And what I thought was great about Art is that he kept on reminding us about some of the other things we're forgetting, like ADU, buy-down programs, rental assistance, the fact that the trust is buying, like, he was always talking about that. You mentioned the rehab. I think that was a good thing. But I think keeping us separate still works. I don't think we need to have it going back and forth. I mean, I'm more than happy to, I sat in a couple of your meetings, last year or something, or maybe the year before, I came to 2 of them.
But Brendan, to your point, and to Mary's, it would be a great recruiting tool if you could give us some ideas and exactly, specifically, what the housing committee would do to help the housing trust.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically.
Yeah, just give
All
me a-
we do is talk about like having, some marketing meetings and letting
Yeah.
people know we're here. What would be a great meeting just to have one per quarter and say, we're here as a housing committee, and those people that need affordable housing, please come and tell us what you want to see.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I just want to bring this to a real personal level, I have 2 dear friends that are renting right now. These little houses that are in the back of their big houses or attachments, okay? They are not more than 600 square feet, maybe one's at 7. And over 90 couples or people applied to each one of those, 90. So, now I would love to know how many of them live in this town, not that it really matters to me, because affordable housing, but the need is obviously there, and I wrote down in my notes, I'm like, the need, what's the types, where are they out there, who are they? I know you can't, it's tough to get all that information, because it's obviously private, so.
So Joe, that's an accessory dwelling unit.
Again, Mayor?
That's an
what's approved
accessory
now.
dwelling unit. That's an ADU.
Yeah.
Has to be less than, I think, 900.
947, yeah.
And we put in our ADU bylaw that if it's an ADU, then it has to be at least more than 6 months rental.
Right.
So,
Am I wrong in making this assumption? Because I thought one of the biggest critical problems was that you guys were out on an island by yourselves and there was no nexus to anybody, not just us. Wasn't there a period of time when Charlene would actually come to the housing committee
Very
meetings?
beginning she came, yeah, a few times, yep.
Because if structurally it was that some staff of some sort was there and would come to our meetings too, because Charlene was always at our meetings, even though we had the contract with CDP. So we knew what it was that she had talked about when she went to your meetings, but that blew up. I mean,
Right.
and then we didn't have a staff liaison at all, like the planning board does, the ZBA does, and we didn't have,
But
you
does
didn't have that
make sense
relationship.
to recruit a third person to get specifics of what we should do would really be helpful. And I can tell you what I'd love to do, but I'd love to hear what you guys think as well, It's probably not time for this meeting either, Joe, but, that's a separate thing.
I'd love to just get you up and running.
I do want to say this, Larry, I think we can hear you.
Oh, yeah.
Can you?
Larry, we can hear you.
Oh, good, thank God.
So, do you want to make a motion to adjourn?
It's been moved and seconded, all in favor.
Larry, the floor is yours.
With the exception of the last minute or two, I've heard the whole meeting. But I don't have much to add. I'm just sitting here looking out the window.
Don't go there.
Mayor Maslowski?
so I guess my suggestion would be for Joe and I to try and schedule a meeting, possibly for February or March, and then we can circle back. Perhaps we schedule another joint meeting to move further on and touch base on the plan, if that makes sense.
Maybe work on maybe potentially 3 consultants, or we can
Does that make sense?
Do you
What
think
was that?
do you think you'd be ready for next month, or do you want to wait for 2 months? Or I would like to do it sooner.
I don't know how a meeting in February, we're talking, we're already at the 20th of January.
I'm just offering up the opportunity. I don't want it to be perceived that we're
No,
waiting,
I
that we're pushing
understand
it
that.
back.
We typically meet in the first week of the month. I cannot meet the first week in February.
Okay. When do you guys meet? Well, third? What time of each week?
Fourth Monday of every month at 1 o'clock. So we have a meeting scheduled for January 31st, and my question would be is, amongst the 2 or 4 of you, given the time of day that it is, could any of you pop in on our meetings? And I will also put out there that our meetings may be hybrid like this one is today, so someone could potentially dial in as a attendee, but not a member of the trust, so. Because as everyone's talked about, we have plenty to discuss. I'm gonna be sending out a draft agenda tomorrow to the trust for our meeting on the 31st, and we already have plenty to discuss. Linda, to your point about the consultants, we can talk about that if we want on the 31st, because I could be able to get some names if we wanted to start that process.
Why don't
We
we
could at
give it
least
one-
also talk about the potential value to derive the procurement process.
And see where you are.
Right.
And Mary, I'll just work around your schedule. You have many more committees than I do.
What about just giving them that task? Like, it's one thing, and let's,
I don't disagree. What I'm saying is, I know there's everyone
I
wants
think you
to
need
get
to
moving
read
on the
that
plan.
plan, read it, get a consultant.
The current production
Yeah,
plan?
you just can't just, and just see
Redline
what's
it.
missing, you're gonna redline it, and we could do that as well, but I think if it's a task you guys wanna take on, I think that'd be great. And get the 3 consultants and they can wrap it up, there's so much information in the last 4 years that's missing from that.
Yeah. It's a
So
great
I think that'd be a task, I think it'd be a great idea, and you're supposed to help us with that plan. Every year, we meet once a year according to the bylaw, obviously, we can meet more than that, but I think it's something that if you could take charge, we'll,
See, that's why I'm still thinking it's 2 different plans.
you think it's
It's
two
not.
plans?
It isn't.
I think it is, if you read, I do think it is, and I'll agree to disagree with you, but, if you read it, it says to meet annually and provide a report to the Board of Selectmen on the annual housing plan. And the housing production plan is, I think, maybe the overriding
Then,
5-year plan.
If I could ask,
But it says in the bylaw, just so I have language, the housing committee to work with us to develop an affordable housing plan.
so,
So you're saying that says, you make up a plan?
It says to meet annually and to report it to the Board of Selectmen. I almost think it's an annual, I almost think it's your annual calendar, or what you're intending to do,
Strategic plan.
that's governed by the overall affordable, overall plan. I could be wrong, that's my gut reaction
Well, the language is
because of the
different.
way it's drafted.
Well, then we've got another conundrum. We don't have an action plan. I kept trying to push the prior administrator into that. We don't even know what our rules of operation are to be able to deliver anything like that. As I kept saying that originally, is that he wanted to dump off $100,000 to this developer or to that developer. I'm like, we don't have any priorities set for where we're gonna spend money.
But that's a discussion for the trust to determine on an annual basis.
I'm just saying that
right?
there isn't a plan currently in place.
Right, because that was an issue for us on CPC every year when we were
However,
I think the
drafting.
plan is we meet at the beginning of the year, we come up with a plan, and then a year goes by and we see what we got accomplished. Is that the plan?
And that's what I think it is.
well,
think
I have to ask several
But
questions.
a lot of it's in the production plan. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
But
one and the same.
that's
You
my
could be right, though,
question,
Mary.
if I may. We have a bylaw that was created by the town in 2018, I believe, that led to the creation of the Affordable Housing Trust and all the things that went with that. The town had a housing production plan in place in 2016. Who spearheaded that?
I think it was the planning office.
Say again?
I think it was the planning office.
Okay.
That's what I thought.
All right, so the planning office spearheaded it in 2016. Since then, we have an affordable housing trust and all the accomplishments that Brendan's already talked about. And we have a bylaw that talks about an affordable, so the agenda is correct, an affordable housing plan. Have the Affordable Housing Trust and the Housing Committee discussed an affordable housing plan since the inception of the bylaw?
No.
All right, and my last question would be,
We did have one of those annual meetings, though.
CP funding.
We did have an annual meeting with you, though. Yeah, we did.
We did not have a joint, Dawn,
well,
I've been on since
if I
17,
could,
and I
I
don't remember an
haven't-
annual meeting.
I haven't
I'll go
yielded
back
the
There
and
floor
was a
find
yet.
joint meeting?
It was downstairs, and it was a joint meeting, and
It
we were
was
in the
you,
library.
but it wasn't a joint
Well, I
meeting, it wasn't
haven't,
the trust.
folks, I haven't yielded the floor. This
I'm
is an
sorry.
affordable housing trust meeting, and I'd like to continue if I could. And I'll open it back up for this discussion. But my overall question is, knowing the work that I have done here in the town and the roles that I've had, and I've come across errors, omissions, and scrivener's error, are we certain that it was not intended to say that these two bodies come together for the Harwich Housing Production Plan?
No, it says here, it
Because
says,
if if it was intended to be an affordable housing plan as written, then let's start the conversation again before 6 o'clock tonight and say, what is an affordable housing plan? Because what I've heard is there's never been a joint discussion on an affordable housing plan. We do know of a document that's 5 years, soon to be 6 years old. Why wouldn't these two committees come together on the production plan? And why wouldn't we use that as part of an element of a housing plan?
Can I housing plan? I'm getting very confused.
I thought they were the same.
So-
I did too.
well, we agreed at the beginning of the meeting that it was the same. So if we work off that premise, then we could just move forward.
Right.
But we keep on going backwards.
Yes.
So it's just, but
confused.
to
Are
Mary
we
had a
talking
great,
about
Mary had a
two, or
great point.
Are we talking about three different plans? Are we talking about a 5-year plan?
So there is the overarching, I think there's the overarching 5-year plan.
That's the production.
Now, and I will
plan.
say I was not involved in any of the draft of the trust documents, and I believe the draft trust documents originated with a form that's in Yarmouth. I don't know what was intended when that was written. I would just question if it is supposed to be an annual meeting with a report to the selectmen. I wouldn't think that plan is then the housing production plan. Because to me, the housing production plan is something that's put in place every 5 years and updated on a 5-year basis, as opposed to an annual meeting.
That was a status meeting, as I understood it, that we'd get together to see
And-
where we
and I don't-
were.
And I don't know.
When you're, just for my understanding, when you, Mary, are talking about a housing plan, are you talking about a strategic plan, or are you talking about a,
I'm talking
Summary.
the Affordable Housing Trust bylaw says that the Affordable Housing Trust and the Harwich Housing Committee are to meet annually to discuss an affordable housing plan and report to the Board of Selectmen. That's what the bylaw says.
so you don't think that that's like an analysis of where we all are in reference to the 5-year master plan?
That makes sense
It
to
could
me.
be.
Yeah, how far have you gone
But
with
to
the
me, a
plan?
plan is a plan of action versus a report.
But the plan of action is one of the pieces that the trust is supposed to execute on, which is, I think, a separate, in my mind, it's a third
Makes
plan.
sense, yeah.
Because some of these things we don't have any impact on. We didn't write bylaws for the planning department. I mean, we encouraged it, we supported the accessory dwelling revision of the planning,
But I mean, again,
but
to
we can't
Joe's-
do that.
To the chairman's point here, the housing production plan predated the trust,
Right.
right? It
That's true.
predated the trust.
Yes.
Right?
But that
The
actually could
trust
be
came
viewed
in
as
and the trust
progress.
was the trust was supposed to be a means to affect reaching the goals of the housing production plan, because that was one of the recommendations. Along with using, looking at reuse of hotel motels, along with creating, simplifying your accessory dwelling unit to make it, as a matter of right versus by special permit like we had already.
So if I may, given the fact that we have a full membership of the Affordable Housing Trust, 2 representatives from the Housing Committee, 2 selectmen, one of whom serves on the trust and one of whom is a liaison to the Housing Committee, we have a bylaw obligation to meet annually. Perhaps we should contemplate that this discussion
Run up.
ahead of the discussion that would happen before the end of December of this year. And so that in weeks and months, the Affordable Housing Trust discuss items that would be updates on the status of the affordable housing plan. The Housing Committee could do the same. We can still talk about joint meetings between now and then, and also talk about, because the town needs to, we've heard, update our Harwich housing production plan as well.
Makes
And then
sense.
to tie that all in, to Don's point about the action plan, this is your deal now, not ours. The action plan makes all sense in the world to me of what to do with the current production of housing you currently have and the money that you have.
And that can change month to month sometimes, right? I mean,
Correct.
Although absent a
That's the
plan,
point of the trust.
Right.
although absent a plan, we almost piddled away enough money where we couldn't have afforded the Marsline property, literally.
Yeah.
right, yeah, so,
I would think that's what you folks will decide at a full trust meeting, put together your budget. I mean, it's one of the issues that, speaking on putting the CPC hat on, every time the applications came in, you will recall, certain members of the CPC always asked what you spent your money on and what other programs were going on and what your annual budget was, so that we were looking for that information, so.
But that was so this, and I really mean that. It's like, you're talking apples and we're talking oranges. We were aggregating money for a future unknown prospect.
I'm only pointing out that
So
was
you can't budget for that.
But that was a question that was asked. But it could be. You could decide that you wanted to use X amount of money for a rental program or for a rehab program or whatever. And my point is just those were the questions that were coming up at CPC meetings on.
Oh,
it.
I
So,
get
I mean,
it.
I understand the point that you don't have a budget, but.
Some of it was on us, though. It was 16 months and we didn't do anything to advance getting an action plan going. Nothing.
Knowing that the Affordable Housing Trust has a full membership and a standard meeting schedule, and we're meeting in 12 days, we have the mechanisms, with me sending around a draft agenda as early as tomorrow, to talk about what we want to do in 12 days. What do you folks on the Housing Committee want to do or need to do, or what do you need to get you folks back so that you are not dead in the water and not, idle for 6 or 12 months or whatever?
I think we need to just schedule a meeting.
Yeah.
And we need some contact information so that we can circulate an agenda. I mean, I can put one together, or Joe can put one together, and
So Ellen Powell in the Administration Department is our guru of all things committee. So she can certainly provide you folks with contact information for your members.
Can I say one thing about that, though? Because I want to clarify something. Not disparaging anybody, but the reality was, Art tried to get us to fire somebody on his say-so without any, we didn't even know about the car crash, to be honest with you. If there is somebody who's reluctant to serve and just has had it, we'd like to know about that, because
Oh, and
there's no
we would-
place to put them right now because they're occupying a position.
Yeah.
so we
One of
understand
the
that.
members lost contact.
If you could try to reach out, because that's a rationale to drop somebody from a committee right there. Can't
Couple
find
phone
them.
calls.
Understood.
Yeah.
I think you and I had that conversation back in June, so.
Yeah. So if you could get to 3 and organize,
Yeah.
and then
Cindy
you find
wants
out
to be involved
who it
too.
is you can't find and you can't get in touch with, get it to the Board of Selectmen, through the Appointments Committee, and it'll wind up being somebody that we remove under the charter. And find you somebody who is going to participate.
The newest member, who I think is Claudia, came to the Marceline walkthrough. You probably remember her.
She has a lot of
Very-
credentials.
Very energetic, very interested, wants to get involved, so I think you'll find her very receptive.
What was her name again, man?
Her
Claudia.
name is Claudia Williams.
Thank you.
She's the new and as Joe said, Ellen can give you phone numbers and emails and whatnot.
She was very impressive in the interview. I mean, and you saw her out there, so
She and I chatted quite a bit on the walkthrough.
I think if you could get her going, it would be terrific, because she has credentials and she's really fired up.
Fantastic. Yeah, we just need a meeting, that's all.
Okay.
You
Well, I
know,
just
we-
wanted to say that because as a matter of my own personal ethos, I don't like to fire anybody without knowing the backstory, and that's what it appeared that we were being asked to do. So, but if they're legitimately not capable of serving, that's a different story.
No, understood.
So if I may, we have 34 minutes, less than 34 minutes to vacate for the Historic District Historical Commission, which is coming in.
Well, she
but,
doesn't have to move.
Do you want to create a plan to vacate?
Well, thanks. Well, what I was just gonna say is what I've learned about plans so far. So I understand, I think, that an affordable housing plan, as you've all said, is a status statement. And so the two entities, Housing Committee and Affordable Housing Trust, have an obligation, and I would suggest to the two selectmen members here that probably what we're talking about is the annual committee reports plus. So not only would the Housing Committee give their annual report to the Board of Selectmen and the Affordable Housing Trust give their report to the Selectmen, but separately, before the end of the year, the two entities would come together with a joint status update on affordable housing plan activities
What we've
for
been
the
up
year
to.
for the town.
Yeah.
Which is different from the housing production plan, which I've heard referenced and I agree with as an actionable plan and actually meant to accomplish things over a number of years.
And Joe, that gets where you want to be.
Action.
Because if you get in the selectmen's meeting, people see that because they tune into that and they watch it on YouTube later on.
Yeah.
As you start going downhill to subordinate committees, not so much. And then you start feeling completely neglected. But if we can, I'm sure Mary would agree, if you can get in front of the Board of Selectmen more with affordable housing conversations legitimately, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And it gets people to see what we're doing and hopefully support what we're doing.
Right.
Mary?
Just to concur, we're in agreement, Joe and I will work together and try and schedule a meeting. We'll get information from Ellen so that we recontact everybody and try and do a meeting. And then I think to the actionable points, we will schedule after our reorganization meeting, we can reach out to you folks to schedule another meeting to kind of discuss status, and also perhaps to discuss the charge of how we assist you folks in accomplishing the task under whatever action plan that may be. And we can also probably pick up a discussion on kind of what our membership is, and I think it may be go down to, should the membership be 5, should it be greater, should it be whatever, along Mary's point with this agenda item. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think it tells us that we don't need to get to the next agenda item that we have tonight.
Right.
So if we're wrapping up, Larry Brophy, if you can hear us, we want to make sure that you have a chance to weigh in again.
Oh, I weigh about 176 pounds. Outside of that, I don't have anything to add.
I get it, I said weigh in, all right. Oh, that's a granddad joke, let alone a dad
That's
joke.
not even a dad joke.
All right, so Larry, we're gonna pretend you're muted then. So for everyone else present, certainly for the trust members, any other thoughts that you want to add before we do adjourn our meeting? And then before we adjourn, we'd certainly open up back to Mary, Joe, and Mary for any other comments you want us to consider and
Well said.
put out there in the public record.
Yeah.
I'm good.
All right,
All set?
so then is there a motion to adjourn the Affordable Housing Trust meeting?
So moved.
It's been moved, is there a second?
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. We have to do this by roll call because we've got Larry remote. So Larry, on the motion to adjourn?
Aye.
Thank you. Brendan?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Judith?
Yep.
And I'm an aye. 5-0. We're adjourned. Thank you, folks. Thank you, Caleb.
Thanks, Caleb.
This conference is no longer being
Let's relax.
recorded.